Preston Blake sat at a polished wooden table. His hands were shaking violently. He adjusted his silk tie. Felt tight, like a noose. Across from him sat his lawyer, Lawrence Croft. Lawrence was flipping through a thick stack of legal papers. He looked panicked. Preston whispered, his voice cracking with fear. He asked if they had any chance at all. Lawrence did not look up. He said that if the judge denies the request, Preston is completely finished. His business, his mansion, his wealth, it all goes away. He would be put on a plane and deported by sunset. Preston looked out the window at the rain. He had built an empire in this city. He thought his money made him untouchable. He thought he was better than everyone else, especially the poor and the struggling. But a massive trap was about to spring shut. The heavy doors opened. The judge walked in. Preston raised his eyes and gasped. The man in the black robe was someone Preston knew. It was a man whose life Preston had destroyed 6 years ago at a luxury restaurant. Before we find out what happens next in this courtroom, take a quick moment to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more powerful stories just like this one. Also, leave a comment below and let us know where you are watching this video from. We love connecting with our viewers from all over the world. Now, let us go back to the very beginning of the story. To understand how Preston ended up in that courtroom, you have to understand the kind of man he was. Preston was born in a small, comfortable European town, but he always felt he was meant for bigger things. He moved to the United States in his early 20s. He came on a temporary business visa. He was brilliant. He was aggressive. He was utterly ruthless. Within 10 years, he started a luxury real estate company. He made millions of dollars. He bought a beautiful penthouse apartment overlooking the city. He drove sports cars that cost more than most people earned in a decade. But wealth did not make Preston kind. It made him blind. He began to believe that his money made him better than everyone else. He treated his employees like machines. He treated strangers like obstacles. Preston had a specific target for his cruelty. He targeted immigrants. It was a strange thing because Preston was an immigrant himself. But in his mind, he was different. He was a wealthy investor. He was not like the people who came with nothing. He despised anyone who struggled with the English language. If a taxi driver missed a turn, Preston would scream from the back seat. "Learn the language or go back to your country," he would yell. If a grocery clerk took too long to count his change, he would make a scene. He would demand to speak to a manager. Preston's friends tried to calm him down. They told him he was being too harsh. But Preston would just laugh. "If you want to live here, you need to sound like you belong here," Preston would say. He would swirl his expensive drink. "I worked hard to get rid of my own accent. I expect others to do the same. If they cannot speak properly, they should not work in public." He truly believed his success made him untouchable. He felt like the master of the world. And on a warm Friday night in October, his arrogance reached its peak. It was a celebration. Preston had just closed a $20 million real estate deal. He wanted to impress his top clients. He also wanted to impress his beautiful girlfriend, Vanessa. He booked the best table at Prime 10. It was the most exclusive steakhouse in the city. The restaurant was beautiful. It had dim lighting, soft leather booths, and crystal chandeliers. Preston sat at the head of the table. He wore a custom three-piece suit. He spoke loudly. He wanted everyone in the restaurant to know who he was. He wanted them to know how much money he made. "Order whatever you want," Preston told his guests. He waved his hand grandly. "The sky is the limit tonight. Nothing but the best for my friends." A young waiter approached the table. He wore a clean white apron and a black tie. He looked tired, but he carried himself with dignity. He had a warm, polite smile. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," the waiter said. "Welcome to Prime 10. My name is Mateo. I will be taking care of you tonight." The moment Mateo spoke, Preston's smile vanished. Mateo spoke with a thick, distinct Hispanic accent. He pronounced his words carefully. He tried his best to be clear, but his heritage was obvious. Preston rolled his eyes. He did not even look at the menu. "Great," Preston muttered loudly. He wanted the whole table to hear him. They give us a guy who probably cannot even read the specials. Vanessa nudged Preston under the table. Preston, stop, she whispered, but Preston just smirked. Mateo kept his composure. His smile tightened, but he remained professional. He pulled out a small notepad. May I start you off with some drinks tonight? Preston leaned forward. He decided to have some fun at the waiter's expense. Yes, Mateo, Preston said. He intentionally mispronounced the name. We want a bottle of the Cabernet, the 2012 vintage. Do you know what a vintage is, Mateo? Or do they just serve pond water where you come from? A few of Preston's clients laughed nervously. Mateo's face turned red, but he kept his voice steady. Yes, sir. The 2012 Cabernet. An excellent choice. I will bring it right out. When Mateo returned with the wine, things went from bad to worse. Mateo stood by Preston's side to pour the wine. He carefully lifted the bottle. At that exact moment, Preston made a sudden, aggressive gesture with his arm. He was telling a loud joke to a client. Preston's elbow struck Mateo's arm. The bottle slipped. A small splash of dark red wine landed directly on Preston's sleeve. It was a pristine white dress shirt. The table went completely silent. Preston froze. He looked down at the red stain. It looked like blood against the white fabric. His face turned bright red with rage. He stood up so fast his chair flew backward. Crashed against the floor. You clumsy idiot, Preston roared. Every head in the restaurant turned toward their table. The quiet, upscale atmosphere was shattered. I am so sorry, sir, Mateo said quickly. He reached into his pocket for a white cloth. It was an accident. Let me help you. Get away from me, Preston screamed. He slapped Mateo's hand away. Do not touch me with your dirty hands. The restaurant manager came rushing over. His face was pale. Mr. Blake, please. What happened? Preston pointed a shaking finger at Mateo. What happened? This garbage just ruined a $5,000 custom suit. But what do you expect when you hire people straight off the boat? Mateo stood there. He did not yell back. He did not cry. He just stood straight. He took the abuse, even though his hands were trembling. Preston was not finished. He decided to humiliate the young man completely. Let me tell you something, Mateo, Preston sneered. He mimicked the waiter's accent in a high, mocking, cartoonish voice. It is not that hard to pour the wine, okay? Just pour it into the glass. Amigo, not on the shirt. Do you understand me? Or do I need to speak Spanish for your tiny brain? The mockery was brutal. It was cruel. Several people at nearby tables gasped. Vanessa looked down at her plate. She was utterly embarrassed by Preston's behavior. Mateo looked Preston dead in the eye. For a brief second, the fear vanished from the waiter's face. It was replaced by a look of profound, quiet strength. I understand you perfectly, sir, Mateo said. He spoke in his normal voice. It was clear and calm. I am sorry for the accident, but there is no need to insult my family or my country. I will insult whatever I want, Preston barked. Manager, fire this man right now. If he is still working here in 5 minutes, I will take all my business away from this restaurant. And believe me, I spend enough here to pay this idiot's salary for a year. The manager looked trapped. He looked at Preston, the wealthy regular customer. Then he looked at Mateo, the hourly worker. Money won. Mateo, the manager said quietly, go to the back. Clock out. Leave your apron. Preston smiled triumphantly. He picked up his napkin and wiped his hands. Thank you. Now get me a fresh table. And bring us a bottle of wine that has not been handled by a peasant. Mateo turned around. He did not look back. He walked through the kitchen doors and out of the restaurant. Preston enjoyed the rest of his evening. He felt powerful. He had taught a lesson to someone he considered lesser. By the next morning, Preston had completely forgotten Mateo's name. He had forgotten his face. He had forgotten the whole incident. But the universe has a way of remembering. 6 years passed. Time is a funny thing. It can build a man up, and it can tear him down just as quickly. For a long time, Preston kept winning. His business grew even larger. He became a well-known face in high society. But Preston's aggressive nature eventually caught up with him. He began taking shortcuts. He hired cheaper lawyers. He ignored warnings from his accounting team. Then came the audit. The federal government began investigating Preston's real estate firm. They looked into tax problems. They dug deep into his financial history. They did not find any major fraud. But they found something much worse for Preston. They found a major flaw in his immigration file. When Preston had applied for his permanent residency status years ago, his lawyers had filed the wrong paperwork. A crucial background check had never been completed. For years, Preston had been renewing his visas based on a bad document. It was an honest mistake by a lazy lawyer. But the law did not care about intentions. To the government, Preston Blake was an undocumented immigrant. He had been operating an illegal business for over a decade. The government moved fast. They froze his business accounts. They took away his commercial licenses. Preston went from a multimillionaire to a man fighting for his freedom overnight. He hired a seasoned legal expert, Lawrence Croft. "We have one shot, Preston," Lawrence told him in his office. "We have to ask for a special waiver. We have to prove to an immigration judge that you are a benefit to this country. We have to show you have good moral character. We must show that deporting you would cause extreme hardship." Preston laughed bitterly. "Good moral character? Lawrence, I have donated thousands to charity. I employ people. This should be an easy win." "Nothing is easy in an immigration court," Lawrence warned. "It all depends on the judge. Some judges are very strict. We have to hope we get someone who understands business." Preston was not worried. He still believed his charm and his past wealth would save him. He thought he could just talk his way out of it. He was a master negotiator, after all, until he walked into that courtroom. Now we are back in the sterile white room. The rain is beating against the glass. Preston is staring up at the judge's bench. His heart is frozen in his chest. It was him. There was absolutely no doubt about it. The man sitting in the high black robe was Mateo. He held the power of life and death over Preston's future. He was older now. His hair was cut short and neat. He wore glasses that made him look incredibly intelligent. But it was the same man. The waiter from Prime 10. The man Preston had humiliated. The man Preston had gotten fired over a spilled splash of wine. Preston felt sweat break out on his forehead. He looked at his lawyer, Lawrence Croft. Lawrence was completely oblivious. He was organizing his papers, getting ready to speak. Preston wanted to scream. He wanted to run out of the room. How could this happen? How could a waiter from a steakhouse become a federal judge in 6 years? Preston did not know the truth about Mateo. Mateo had been a top law student in his home country. He had fled political unrest. He came to America with nothing. He took the waiter job at Prime 10 to pay his bills. At the same time, he studied night and day to validate his law degree in the United States. He graduated at the top of his class. He became a human rights lawyer, then a federal prosecutor, and finally a highly respected immigration judge. Mateo had worked for every single thing he had. Preston had obtained his wealth through luck and ruthlessness. Now their paths had crossed again. But the tables were completely turned. Judge Mateo looked down at the file. He cleared his throat. "Case number 441A, Mateo announced. His voice was deep and commanding. The thick accent Preston had mocked was gone. It was replaced by a beautiful, clear voice. It was the voice of a man who belonged in this courtroom. In the matter of Preston Blake. Appeal for relief from deportation. Lawrence stood up. "Good morning, Your Honor." Lawrence Croft representing the respondent, Mr. Preston Blake. Mateo nodded slowly. He did not look at Preston. He looked at the paperwork. "Mr. Croft, I have reviewed your brief. You are asking this court to overlook a serious, long-standing violation of immigration law. You base this on your client's business contributions and character." "Yes, Your Honor," Lawrence said confidently. "Mr. Blake has been a pillar of the community. He has generated millions of dollars in revenue. He is a job creator. He represents the very best of what an immigrant can achieve in this country. He is a man of high character. Judge Mateo finally raised his eyes. He looked directly at Preston. The silence in the room became heavy. Preston felt like he could not breathe. The judge's eyes were completely unreadable. There was no anger in them. There was no malice. There was only a cold, hard emptiness. High character. Judge Mateo repeated the words slowly. He leaned back in his chair. Mr. Croft, the law allows a judge great flexibility in these matters. But that flexibility is based on a fundamental question. Does the respondent show respect for the laws, the people, and the values of this nation? Of course, Your Honor, Lawrence said, smiling. Mr. Blake is deeply respectful. Is he? Judge Mateo asked quietly. The judge picked up a pen. He began tapping it against the desk. Tap, tap, tap. The sound echoed in the quiet room like a ticking clock. Tell me, Mr. Blake, Judge Mateo said. He addressed Preston directly for the first time. Do you believe that success in this country gives a person the right to look down on others? Preston swallowed hard. His throat felt like sandpaper. He tried to speak, but no sound came out. He cleared his throat. No, Your Honor. Do you believe, Mateo continued, his voice dropping lower, that a person's worth is measured by how well they speak a language when they are trying to rebuild their life from nothing? Preston's hands were shaking violently. He had to hide them under the table. He knew exactly what the judge was talking about. The memory of the restaurant felt so vivid. He could almost smell the wine. He could hear his own cruel voice mimicking the man's heritage. No, Your Honor, Preston whispered. Lawrence looked confused. He glanced between his client and the judge. He could feel the sudden tension in the room, but he did not understand where it was coming from. Your Honor, if I may, I am asking your client, Mr. Croft. Judge Mateo interrupted firmly. He did not take his eyes off Preston. Mr. Blake, I look at your record. I see your achievements. But I also look at how a man conducts himself when he thinks no one is watching. I look at how he treats those who have less power than him. Because that is the true test of character. Preston knew he was trapped. He knew his fate was sealed. This man was going to destroy him. It was the perfect revenge. The waiter was going to deport the millionaire. Preston closed his eyes, waiting for the final blow. He prepared himself to hear the words that would end his life in America. Judge Mateo opened the thick folder containing Preston's life. He picked up his signing pen. The law is a tool, Judge Mateo said. His voice echoed off the walls. It can be used to punish and it can be used to protect. When people come to this country, they often face cruelty. They face mockery from people who think money makes them superior. They face people who try to break their spirit. The judge paused. He looked down at the paper. But the greatness of this country does not belong to the cruel, Mateo said. It belongs to those who endure. It belongs to those who work through the mockery and build something beautiful anyway. Preston braced himself. He felt a tear slip down his cheek. He had lost everything. Mr. Blake, Judge Mateo said, your legal paperwork was indeed filed incorrectly. By the strict letter of the law, you are subject to immediate removal. Lawrence sighed, his shoulders slumping. However, Judge Mateo continued, the purpose of this court is also to look at the whole picture of a life. Despite your flaws, your business supports 50 American families. Your deportation would cause immediate unemployment for those people. This court will not punish innocent workers for your past errors. Preston opened his eyes. He looked up, completely stunned. Judge Mateo brought his pen down on the paper. He signed his name with a swift, powerful stroke. He stamped the document with the official seal of the court. I am granting the waiver, Judge Mateo announced. Your residency status is approved. You are permitted to remain in the United States. Preston's jaw dropped. He could not believe what he was hearing. He looked at Lawrence, who was suddenly smiling and nodding. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Lawrence said, bowing his head. But Judge Mateo was not finished. He banged his gavel once. The sharp sound echoed like a gunshot. This court is adjourned, the judge said. He stood up. He gathered his papers. But before he turned to walk out of the door, he stopped. He looked down at Preston one last time. The judge leaned forward slightly over his bench. The room was quiet. The guards stood at attention. Then Judge Mateo spoke. He spoke in a low voice, meant only for Preston's ears. And when he spoke, he used a high, slightly exaggerated rhythm. It was a subtle, unmistakable echo of the mockery from 6 years ago. "It is not that hard to be kind, Mr. Blake," Mateo said. A faint spark was in his eyes. "Just treat people with respect. Do you understand me?" Preston's breath caught in his throat. The lesson struck him right in the heart. It was a blow more powerful than any deportation order could ever be. The judge did not destroy Preston's life. He did something much more profound. He showed Preston mercy. He showed him the exact dignity and grace that Preston had denied him all those years ago. He proved that he was the bigger man in every possible way. Judge Mateo turned around, his black robe flowing behind him, and disappeared through the private doors. Preston walked out of the courthouse into the pouring rain. He did not care about the water ruining his expensive suit. He did not care about his wet shoes. He stood on the stone steps of the building. He looked out at the city. He felt completely empty, yet entirely full. Lawrence was walking beside him. He was talking rapidly about the next legal steps. But Preston was not listening. His mind was trapped in that courtroom. He kept seeing Mateo's face. He kept hearing that quiet, powerful phrase. "It is not that hard to be kind." Preston realized that his wealth had been a prison. It had isolated him. It had turned him into a monster. A man he despised had just given him his life back. The experience changed Preston forever. He did not go back to his old ways. The next week, Preston resigned as the leader of his real estate firm. He appointed his top manager to run the daily business. Preston used his vast fortune to start a non-profit foundation. The foundation's purpose was clear. It provided free legal aid, English language classes, and job training for newly arrived immigrants in the city. Preston spent his days in the foundation's humble offices. He no longer wore $5,000 suits. He wore simple clothes. He sat with people from all over the world. He worked with taxi drivers, cleaners, construction workers, and yes, waiters. He listened to their stories. He helped them fill out their paperwork. Whenever he encountered someone struggling with their English, Preston did not get angry. He did not mock them. He would smile warmly, lean in close, and help them find the right words. He never saw Judge Mateo again. He never went back to Prime 10. But every single day, before Preston started his work at the foundation, he would look at a small framed picture on his desk. It was not a picture of his penthouse or his sports cars. It was a simple printout of the foundation's mission statement. And written at the very bottom of the page in elegant letters were the words that had saved his soul. "It is not that hard to be kind." Preston Blake had spent his whole life trying to be powerful. But in the end, he learned that the greatest power in the world is not money, status, or a loud voice. The greatest power in the world is mercy. And sometimes, the only way to find your humanity is to be broken by the very person you tried to destroy.